We tend to use the words recovery and sobriety interchangeably. Reality is, they're two very different things. Generally, sobriety is defined as not using a mind-altering substance. Recovery is doing the healing and processing necessary to remain free of the substance and live a happy and fulfilling life without it. In this podcast episode, we invited Steve, Mike, and Will to join us for a conversation about what recoveries look like in their lives. Recovery looks different for every person, based on their life experiences and their needs. Listen as these three men, plus your hosts, Steve and Julie, share how they figured out what needed healing and the steps they took to do the work of recovery.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Julie and Steve. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full there's no space left for alcohol.
The idea of doing the work is sometimes so abstract, so elusive, that it's hard to know what that means. We invite you to join us on Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, where we explore recovery and host a private support group where everyone is welcome to come and share their recovery journeys. The result is a really cool space where everyone is safe to learn and explore and get the support they need. You don't have to figure this out alone. You can get more information at throughtheglassrecovery.com.
Hello and welcome everybody to Through the Glass Recovery podcast. So happy to have all of you guys here with us. We've got one returning guest, super happy to have Mike back. And then we've got a little bit of fresh meat also. So this should be a lot of fun and really looking forward to it. Also, I get to hang out with the guys and that doesn't happen very often. Like it's a lot of times it's Steve and all the ladies, but we don't get to do Julie and all the guys very often. So this should be a great time. Yeah, we'll start with introductions. And Mike, since you've done this before, I'm going to put you on the spot and let you go first.
Yes, so my name's Mike. I am from Indiana in the US, and I've just hit 7 years sober. So just celebrated that month, and thank you.
Congrats. Yep.
And let's see, by day, I am an e-commerce consultant at this point. I am out on my own. I run my own business. Did that at the middle of last year, I guess. And so I help people sell their products online. And then I also run my own sobriety brand, which is also called Own Sobriety. And we have that on the socials, and we have a community coming and some other stuff there. So I've been pretty deep into the sobriety stuff as well.
Yeah, fantastic. We met Mike back when we first started podcasting, found you on Instagram, and have been following you ever since. So
Yep.
Love what you do in the recovery space and really happy to have you back again.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we're going to go with Will.
Hello, Julie. How are you?
Good. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be on. I had such a great time having you on my show. So let me just firstly just introduce myself. Hi everybody. My name's Will. I run a similar podcast. Not as cool because there's only a bunch of people on this one, but mine's just kind of one-on-one, and it's either me just yapping to everyone or me having really serious conversations with people like Steve and Julie here. In which were just phenomenal episodes. So thank you guys both for coming on. But so my quick story, I'm a liver and kidney transplant survivor. I was a severe closet alcoholic for so many years, over 20 years, honestly, and it eventually, led me to the liver and kidney transplant. But that's a whole story. But I've been sober now for just coming up to my 2-year anniversary. It's a month away. It's on January 27th, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'm just really looking forward. Whoa.
This episode's coming out on your 2-year anniversary.
That'll be a fun celebration. That'll be a birthday
birthday drop, podcast drop.
Yeah, birthday drop.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's a little bit about me. But yeah, I'm just so happy to be here. And I'm really when I saw the question for today's podcast, I got excited because that's something that I feel like you can go so far into. It's just endless with the with how far into it you can get. So I'm excited to have the conversation with you all.
Right.
Yeah, we're excited too. Thank you so much for being here. Can you tell our listeners the name of your podcast?
Sure. It's called The Willpower Podcast, all one word. There's a lot of willpower podcasts out there, guys. So it's all one word, The Willpower Podcast, and that's on YouTube. And then you can follow me on Instagram at the same thing, at The Willpower Podcast. It's hard to say. I wish I
Awesome.
picked an easy name.
No, it's fantastic. And yeah, Steve and I are both on there. You guys can also go to his YouTube page. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And you can hear, like, you can actually get to know more about his story, about Will's story. So make sure you guys check that out for sure.
Love that.
And then last but not least is Steve, who is awake at 1 o'clock in the morning to be hanging out with us. How are you, dude?
Good evening, guys. I am good. I'm good. Yeah, I'm a bit nervous. I'm Steve. Most people either call me Wolf or Wolfie. I'm from Cumbria in the UK, and I'm 50. I'm currently working on building up a broad spectrum support community that covers mental illness, addiction and recovery, chronic pain, chronic illness, trauma. Basically a kind of hub of communities, advocates, and real life centers and charities, so that no matter what issues people have, we will have somebody there in that community that will be able to offer help and support for them. That's kind of my baby at the minute.
Fantastic. And what is the name of your community that you're building?
It's called Warriors of Light for Everyone.
Perfect. That's amazing. And then last question, how long have you been sober, Wolfie?
11 years, 3 days ago.
Wow, 11 years. Kudos.
Yeah. So
Congratulations.
yeah, I've had the privilege of being on a couple of Steve's lives. He invited me to one of them, but he mainly hangs out on TikTok and under Wolfie. I always forget the whole name of it, but anyways, I'm glad you said it. Either way, it's a great conversation that he has. The topics are different. He hosts it, and he does an excellent job of hosting these conversations and getting these communities together. So very much worth giving a follow if that's something that you're interested in or being a part of, because what he's doing over there is amazing, amazing work.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And again, we will have links for all of these guys in the show notes. So make sure you guys check those out and you can follow everybody and keep up with all the cool stuff they're doing in the recovery communities. So really happy to have all you guys with us. So we are reaching the end of dry January, which means we've got a whole lot of listeners who are real close to the end of the month and starting to think about what it's going to look like going forward. There's going to be a lot of people who have realized that life feels a lot better without alcohol in it, and they're going to decide to continue on the sober path. So this is about the time that it becomes important to move from sobriety and start moving into what we call recovery. And there are a lot of people who don't know the difference or don't even know that there is a difference. So how do you define the two? And then what does recovery mean to you? And in your opinion, how does one get to the point of recovery?
And the floor is yours.
It is now a free for all and anybody can jump in.
All right.
Look
Yeah,
ahead.
come on. Get in there. Jump in.
Please. Oh yeah, but that's fine. There's a not a meme, but a graphic that I created that I post on the own sobriety account every once in a while, and it says sober is a state of mind, not an identity. And to me, I think that's kind of the definition of sobriety is a state of mind or the absence of having alcohol as your state of mind. And then recovery is more of doing the deeper work and actually doing the work of recovering from what you were drinking for, doing kind of the deeper work and kind of discovering yourself and the reasons that you drank and the reasons that it's better sober and all your whys and all of that stuff. It's kind of it's kind of a state of mind and then or a process. And I guess if you've done dry Januaries, you probably already know the contrast there between drinking and not drinking, right? Um, so I would encourage anyone to kind of reflect on that contrast between when they were drinking and when they weren't. And that can help you kind of identify your why. And then that's a good motivator for moving forward in your recovery.
I think that I have talked to so many people in recovery or that are getting sober. I'll be coaching clients who are 4, 6 weeks sober and so they know how to live without the alcohol. And I'm like, okay, now this is when we start talking about your why. Why were you drinking? So many people are like, I just drank because it was fun. Like, I don't have any stress. I don't have any problems. Everything's good. I love my life. I wasn't drinking for any reason. I don't have a why. And I hear that a lot. And then we'll go for another 6 or 8 weeks of coaching, and finally they're like, "Oh, shit. There is a why." Literally never met a person who doesn't get to the point where they are like, "Oh, there was really a reason." So there's probably a lot of people listening right now that are like, "I don't really have a reason for why I drink." I would say that is really unlikely. It's just gonna take some time to start figuring that out. But yeah, that's a really good point, Mike. It's about figuring out why you were drinking in the first place.
Yeah, I would say that's actually one of the biggest parts of why people would abuse, alcohol in the first place. It's like you're running away from something, you don't know what that something is, and the alcohol itself encapsulates your identity, and it's almost impossible to get out of it without doing the work of figuring out what is your why. And that's through therapy and things like that is the only way you're gonna kind of figure that out with help and support. But when you're just kind of chewing it on your own and not knowing what the why might be, it gets really it's extremely difficult to get to that part. It's really hard.
So how'd you do it? Was it therapy? Was that how you figured
Yeah.
that out?
So going back to in the beginning of the conversation when we talking about doing the sober, like the 100 dry January, and I was trying to I didn't know my why when I first got sober. I did 125 days sober, and it was like the hardest 125 days ever. And I had no support. I had no one holding me accountable and things like that. And I was just susceptible to fail. And that's exactly what happened. And once I woke up from the liver transplant, that's when I started figuring out the why, because I had that whole year of self-reflection in a hospital bed on dialysis while I awaited a kidney transplant after the liver transplant. So that was a lot of what is my why and what was it that I was running away from. And the only way I actually figured that out was through therapy and through journaling. So like I journal everything. And for me, that's a very super helpful practice in maintaining my sobriety and figuring out those deep questions that are uncomfortable. But when you put them on paper, they're more manageable and a little easier to kind of distribute like your thoughts and meaning behind those thoughts and in words.
For sure. I love that. I love that I'm in a group of dudes and you're talking about journaling because, again, so many guys are like, nah,
Well,
that's or women.
well, I was like that too. I was like that too. That's the thing. I was like that too for my whole life, but now I see the practical practice of it. Like
Yeah,
if you implement it into your life, and there's benefits that will blossom from that. So
definitely. No, I love that you brought that up. Fantastic.
I go off on tangents, so please like redirect me.
You're,
No, you're good. That's what we're here for.
yep, tangents are fun.
That's where the good stuff comes.
Go for it, Steve.
For me, the biggest problem was that I didn't realize what I was using it for. And that's one of the reasons why my page it works the way that it does. Because I'm 19 years substance free now, but it took me so long to actually come off the alcohol, because I was using it to self-medicate, but I didn't understand why. And then when I did actually get sober, my head exploded, and all of the mental trauma and everything came back, and that's what these guys were saying about, being sober is just about putting the alcohol down, but recovery is about finding the right mindset, finding the underlying cause, and then retraining your brain to be able to deal with them, and without turning back to that crutch, to that coping mechanism. And that takes a lot of time and healing to do. And that was kind of the biggest struggle for me, because I had so many relapses, because all they were trying to do was stop me from drinking, and not actually removing the reason why I was drinking, not dealing with the underlying cause. And that's why it took me so long.
It's like you remove the solution to the problem, but if you don't solve the problem, you go back to the solution.
Yeah. And I went around in circles for 7 years.
And you keep trying to use the same solution, and I get it. You keep trying to use the same solution to fix the problem that creates the problem that you try and use to avoid like the solution again. And you just back and forth and around we go. And so I look at sobriety and recovery as sobriety is the what and recovery is the how. So sobriety is, what am I removing from my life, the substance that I'm removing from my life, and then the how is how am I going to change my mindset. It's the same thing you guys are saying. It's all just like a different perspective on it. But how am I going to, what work am I going to do? How am I going to do it? What actions am I going to take that are different than the ones that I was doing before, because that wasn't working? Because if I just remove the substance from my life, I give myself the opportunity to see what my problems really are, because I'm now can't run from them using the same coping mechanism I used over and over again. And one of the hardest parts for me was drinking was part of my identity. Mike, you mentioned this, the identity part. Drinking was, I didn't realize that I had identified with myself and being a drinker so much that it wasn't just removing the substance, it was removing like, this is what I do. Because it was just something that I did with everything for the most part, and I was consumed by it. So when I removed it, the empty space that showed up and what I did inside of that empty space to try and figure out how to resolve my problems, that's the recovery. How do I do that? I mean, I started out in AA, but really, if you're going to look at the how was I talked about it, right? Will, you talked about journaling. Wasn't I mean, I guess I did kind of do that too, because I was on an app called I Am Sober, and I wrote my journal entries essentially there, and I shared those with the people that were on that app, and that gave me an opportunity. Yep, there he is, Wolfie showing it. So it gave me an opportunity to share what my struggles were, and then not be alone in those struggles, because I wasn't the only one struggling with it at the same time as so many other people. Like, you aren't alone. I'm talking to the however many people are listening to this episode right now when it comes out at the end of dry January. But if you're feeling alone right now, there are people out there going through the exact same thing that you're going through in one way, shape, or form. And there's also people out there that have figured out how to get through it. That's the recovery piece. They've figured out how to see the other side of it and then have that be a part of their past instead of a part of their present.
And for me, the internet was a great tool for recovery because I did start out in AA initially a few times when I had some of my stops and starts. But the last time I got sober, I used the internet as a tool basically to research and go out there and learn and network and find other people. And that turned into a great tool. So
Yeah.
just the connection that I found on there and seeing that's where I got to see other people aside from just like if I was going to an AA meeting, I would relate to those groups of people, but I wasn't around those people all the time and you know, I couldn't just look them up whenever, hit them up whenever. So the internet turned into that great resource where I could find people that were always online or always talking about it or always there at any time. So, and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
I think for especially to know that if you're doing the dry in January, or you did it and you now completed it, that's fantastic. Congratulations, that's great. Um, uh, Past me is saying to future me, you, congratulations. But if you didn't and you're struggling and it was super hard, right? Because I feel like when you get into something and you have all these expectations and you have all this lead up to like, okay, this is, I'm sitting down, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stay sober for a whole month. It's almost daunting in that way. And you almost want to approach it how I approach my sobriety, which is, I can just not drink today. And that's kind of how I approach it, right? Because if you make it simpler and you put into those kind of baby step formula, of wording these kind words to yourself, like, okay, I just won't drink today, right? And it's like, oh, okay, well, it's already 5 o'clock, so I don't have to have a drink today. And then you just start that with that same mindset again the next day, right? Like, I just won't drink today. I just don't need to drink today. And then when you make it, man, it tricks your brain into thinking that everything's more manageable because it actually is when you're self assuring yourself that you won't, fall off the wagon. So that's a little tip that I like to always associate within my sobriety. But for those newbies who are jumping into it in January or continuing it into February, um, I would I would I would definitely look into that approach because it's helped me immensely.
And on the other side of that, you don't have to say forever either. Like I was very careful about not putting the link to how long I was going to be sober in the beginning.
Yeah.
I
I
wish that I didn't. Sorry, Julie, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I'm not a one day at a time girl. And I know this goes like against what so many people in the recovery community do. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I know that one day at a time works great for people. So when I quit drinking successfully, I committed to 30 days. No matter what happened, I could do 30 days. And it was not dry January. It was just September 12th. I decided I couldn't do this anymore. So I was like, whatever happens, I'm going to stay sober for 30 days. That took making the decision out of it for me because every day, 5 o'clock would roll around and I'd be like, am I going to drink? Am I not going to drink? Could I drink? Should I drink? Maybe just one. And like my brain would go crazy. So when I committed to 30 days, I'm like, okay, well, I said 30 days, so today is not that day. And I told myself at the end of 30 days, I would decide then what I was going to do about it. And I promised myself I would decide in the morning, not at 5 o'clock in the evening, because we all know what happens at 5 o'clock in the evening. But taking the decision out of it every day actually made it easier for me. I still didn't ever think about forever. It was just, I'm sure I can do this for 30 days. I had done 30 days before. And then on day 31, I woke up in the morning and I was like, all right, what am I going to do? Am I going to commit to another 30? And I did. I committed to the next 30. And that actually made it easier for me to have a chunk of time that I could manage because the manageable piece you talked about, Will, was still really important for me. But anyway, so I guess the reason I'm saying that is just throwing out there that there's so many different ways to look at it and so many different things that work for people. Figure out what works for you and what works for your brain. Because at the end of the day, we're all just tricking our brains, right? Like that's basically what it is. Play my mans.
Yeah, I had someone come up to me recently actually and say, hey, hey Will, I love your channel, blah blah blah. I want, give me advice for someone who's just going sober right now. This is now speaking of January coming up. And I was like, yeah. He's like, so what day should I pick? And I go, okay, what's the most stressful day of the week? And no, I'm sorry, let me backtrack. I said, he goes, well, what day should I pick? And I asked him, what day do you want to pick? And he said, Monday. And I go, okay, so what's the most stressful day of the week? And he goes, Monday. And I go, well, why would you pick one of the hardest decisions of your life to do it on the most stressful day of your life, right? So, of your week. So, those are something that you don't think of when you make a decision to go sober, but something you should definitely be mindful of, because you don't want to set yourself up for disaster on a Monday. Maybe like wait till the weekend or something, or Sunday or something. I don't know.
I was so not that prepared. I was just fucking desperate. On the September 12th at 10 o'clock in the morning, I just could not stand to feel that way again. There was no planning for me. Like, it was,
Yeah, no, I did this whole planning, but but for people who had that self-conscious, that's good for them. I wasn't one of those people, but yeah.
no, it's a fantastic point. I was gonna say when it comes to what is recovery, and I think alcohol allows us to tolerate all of the things we should never have been tolerating in our lives. And so when you stop drinking alcohol, suddenly you're looking around at everything and you're like, how am I supposed to tolerate this now? And I think the answer is you're not. This is where you actually have to start making changes. And that's when we talk about the work, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about things show up in your life and it's not something you're willing to tolerate and it's not something you should have been tolerating. And so now you have to decide what you're going to do about that. And sometimes that's a hard conversation. Sometimes that's a massive life change. Sometimes that's dealing with your own shit that you just haven't resolved. And so you're drinking to try to tolerate it. Turns out you need to actually go to therapy, you need to journal, you need to talk to somebody, you need to work through it and resolve it. But I think at the end of the day, that's like the easiest way that I've summed up what recovery is it's no longer allowing yourself to tolerate all of the things you should have never tolerated to begin with.
Mm.
It's a very good time to get honest with yourself.
Yeah. Every day is, but yes, you're right.
Well, at least in regards to alcohol.
Of course, I know what you mean. I was kidding. Yeah, that's true.
Give me an example, Mike. What did that look like early on? How did you have to get honest with yourself outside of like, I drink too much and I need to stop? What else did you have to deal with?
Oh yeah, like things you're tolerating. I mean, like maybe going to the bar all the time. Maybe you didn't like that bar or something, or the people that you associated with there, but you kept going just because that was your bar or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then just getting honest why you drank in the first place. I was using it to cover up anxiety and depression at the time, and I did counseling as well. So I went almost straight into counseling after my first 30 days because I got sober through a detox program. But mine wasn't like a necessarily a choice I made to do like a dry January or something like that. I got sober out of much more desperation. So I just got honest and said I need to do everything I can to make this stick this time because I'd had several false starts. And so I took advantage of every tool that they offered me in that detox program. I went to counseling. I did a substance abuse or I'm sorry, relapse prevention course. I did the IOP that they offered 7 weeks, 3 times a week, 3 hours a night. I got on the medication that they recommended that I get on for the anxiety and for the depression and all that. So I got a medication. I just took advantage of every program. It was just time to get honest, in other words.
Which takes a ton of courage to show up and to say, hey, I need all the help I can get right now. And to actually let that help in. I think that takes so much courage. It's really scary to do that.
All right, Steve, go for it.
It's really hard when you get to that breaking point, though, because you have to do absolutely everything possible to get through it. It's interesting that we tend to go to bars to drink, so we're in a social environment, but we're actually isolated. You're in a room full of people, but you're on your own. The opposite of addiction is connection. This is the thing that people misunderstand about addiction. I went through all of these processes before. I did the 12-step, I did smart recovery, I did rehab, I did medication, and it wasn't a substance disorder as much as it was a social disorder. Because we're constantly chasing that feeling that we didn't have. We were using the alcohol and everything to dumb down the feelings that we were going through, and that was it about actually getting through all the recovery process, and then learning so much more about alcohol and addiction and the underlying reasons for it. Is that you've got to sort your brain out rather than just turn to the alcohol. You better look at the why you were doing it.
Yeah. Steve Wolf. Can I call you Wolfie? That's awesome. Can I
Yeah.
call you Wolfie?
Right. Yeah.
All right, I'm calling you Wolfie. Wolfie. So, you mentioned something really cool that it sparked my interest because you said that people go to bars and they go for the social aspect of it, but they feel alone and isolated, right? That's how a lot of people feel. So I actually knew that. Like I knew that within myself. That's why I never ever went like all my alcohol abuse, and it was severe alcohol abuse, enough to bring me to a liver transplant, for Christ's sake. But anyway, so that I knew, so I would always bring the biggest, giantest bottle home with me, and that's how my alcoholism was. It was literally isolated. Like I isolated myself because I knew that that's what I was doing anyway. So I might as well just be in my sweatpants when I do it. Isn't that like a interesting little kind of connection? Yeah, that I never thought of it until now. You just realized that. I just realized it because you just said that.
Yeah. We all do the same thing. I was drinking 3 liters of vodka a day, every day.
3 liters. So I was drinking. Yeah. Oh my God, you were really going for it.
Mm.
Oh my God. Yeah, we're messed in the head, aren't we?
Wolfie is a high achiever. No, I'm just kidding.
I started drinking at 12 years old, and it progressively got worse. By the time I was at legal age, I was drinking a bottle of vodka a day, and it just progressed from there. But I was functioning, and that was why, obviously, when I did eventually remove it through rehab, and then my mental health broke down, I realized just how long I've been self-medicating for. We've become so dependent on it because it's so freely available, and it's such a social norm for people to actually to drink. You can't escape it, so you've got to change the way that you look at it.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree.
I think a big thing that I was tolerating the alcohol allowed me to tolerate was loneliness. That was when you talk about connection. I think loneliness was the biggest problem in my life. That is, and I didn't realize that I was surrounded by people. And I have family and friends and whatever, but loneliness, the lack of real connection was absolutely the number one driver behind my drinking. And I couldn't have told you that in the early days. I could never have put those words to it. But once I found real connection, I was like, oh my God, this is everything. This is why I was drinking. So that was a big thing that I learned.
Yeah. Yeah. Go.
Loneliness is what caused the spike during COVID in alcohol consumption,
Absolutely.
and a massive increase in mental health breakdown. We don't realize just how isolated we are, even with all the technology that's around. You need that social interaction with people in real life as well.
Wolfie, when I was in the hospital, so I only had my liver transplant 2 years ago. So this isn't like ancient history. This is very recent. So right for, post COVID. And when I was in, because they keep moving you from room to room, and you talk to so many different people who are going through the same traumatic experience as I was. And I was looking to the right of me, and there was a person who was 10 years younger than me. There was a person to the left of me who was like 6 years younger than me. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I eventually started talking to a team of doctors, and I said, is there an uptick right now in younger people needing these liver transplants? And he's like, oh my God, well, like it has like almost doubled since COVID, like almost doubled. So people were probably problem drinkers, for a good chunk of their lives. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. And then next thing you know, people hit it so hard because they were so isolated and alone and scared and fearful of their life because everyone had masks on. It was terrifying that they just did this, they self-medicated themselves to a transplant like I did pretty much.
COVID made drinking a lot easier for me. COVID made the isolation easier to do.
Right.
So it just isolated me more, and so I could drink more in isolation. Because I couldn't go to bars, I couldn't go to the things, so I just found it separated me more. My drinking skyrocketed even worse than what it was before it started. It didn't take long either, and that was probably directly impacted from the, like, social interactions that I wasn't having anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But you said one thing, Wolfie, that you said functioning. You were functioning. And this is something I think we can get ourselves wrapped up in, saying like everything's fine because I'm functioning. I can function. I can do all of the things that I'm required to do. So even if I quit drinking, I'm still functioning. So I don't have any problems. Right? So I associate my functionality, my high function. Sure, I was drinking and I was still successful at work. I still got the things that I needed to get done for the most part. I didn't lose anything. That doesn't mean that I didn't have a problem, right? It just means my problem didn't get bad enough where I started losing functionality. Because I was already losing functionality. That was a lie. The I am functioning. I was getting some things done, but I was a really poor functioning human overall when I look at it now. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the recovery part that allows me to be a much higher functioning human again.
I liken functional alcoholic or high functioning alcoholic to, it's like doing all of life while you are chained to a cinder block. Like you can do all of the things, but you're not going to do it well. And you're really limited about how far you can go. And getting sober is kind of like cutting the chain, and you're finally not tied down you're not limited anymore because you can function, but it's like survival mode. And all of us deserve to live bigger and better than survival mode
Yeah.
forever.
And imagine those high functioning alcoholics that we're labeling them as, right? Imagine them without the booze in their system, like the mountains they could move, the rivers they could alter, everything like that. Like it blows my mind when people call themselves that, because it's like, well, look at the drive that you must have underlying, underneath all this self-deprecation of alcohol abuse, like it's fascinating in a way, but also extremely sad and at the same time.
I called myself a high functioning alcoholic. That was one of the ways I used to justify continuing drinking.
It's funny you say that, Will, because my friends always used to call me a high function, but it was always while we were drinking that they called me that. So I'm like, you should see me when we're not drinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a funny thing of like this, like the most sober I ever was at like actually family parties and stuff like that, because I didn't the real drinking came when it was just me, myself, and I, not around the people that I cared about. I really kind of held that close to the vest, but yeah.
I was a production manager many years ago, and I was drinking a half bottle of vodka on the way to work and a half bottle of vodka on the way back from work, and doing a 12-hour shift in between. And that was just to slow my brain down in order to do that. And I was driving, and then when I was coming back, then I pick up another bottle and do the paperwork, because my brain needed slowing down, and that was my way of functioning. If I didn't have the alcohol, I couldn't sleep. I was a wreck. I had so much going on in my head that it needed to rest. And that's why when I eventually did get sober, I had to have the mental health intervention. And why I'm medicated now, I can't live without that medication. And when I did put the alcohol down, I swapped my addiction for something else, and then something else, and then something else. Because you've got to keep your brain engaged. It's really.
I once thought that I was such an alcoholic that I have to laugh about it now because it seems like a different life. I was a different person. Honestly, that's how I feel. But I remember I did a job interview one time and I was drunk and I got the job. So, but then I lost the job obviously eventually because of my drinking. But then that was like 2 years later. And then I was like, well, last time this worked and I went into it and I made an ass out of myself. And I convinced myself that I was like a high functioning alcoholic. Look at me, like I'm a smooth talker when I'm drinking. Like all these, I put these delusional ideas in my own brain. And because I had that one time that it actually worked out, it worked, but obviously I could have been way better in that interview if I was just being my complete self, my true authentic self instead of, putting on the veneer of this cool, whatever guy on the phone. I don't know. But yeah, something just popped in my head.
Oh, no, I told myself I was convinced that I was more creative, that I was smarter, that I was a better conversationalist, that I was more fun, all of those things when I was drinking. And that is like could not be further from the truth. But I was absolutely convinced while I was drinking that that was the case. That it kept me drinking. It was a good excuse to keep doing it.
It's amazing for the ego.
Yeah,
Sure is.
all false ego, which is creepy. Yeah. And cricket.
This is something that I wanted to bring up today. This is something I just kind of came across earlier today, and it was called something called post-traumatic growth. Have you ever heard about this?
Yes,
Hmm?
you have. I'm so excited you brought this up.
Yeah, I've never heard of it, and then I was just kind of going over some literature or whatever, and then I came across this term post-traumatic growth. So, Julie, what do you find about it? I mean, I just know that it's just like a cool thing, a cool concept. So, like after you get sober, right, and it's been whatever, however many months, years, whatever, you'll start realizing that because of that sobriety, then they've actually shown studies now of people's like brains changing, and they're also showing studies of like their willingness to do more things in their lives now that they're clear, they have the clarity of sobriety attached to them. So I just thought that was really cool. Like all these people are getting sober and like moving mountains now. They're becoming like high executive level, people and all these like really cool things. And I just thought that was a really cool idea to bring up because you don't hear of those that especially like and now there's being studies done like proving it, which is really cool.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I found that whole idea to be fascinating. I think the first time I heard about it was on a Mel Robbins podcast with Tal Ben-Shahar, which I have talked about before because I'm slightly obsessed with him right now. But it's the idea that trauma is going to change you. If you develop resiliency, if you have the coping skills, if you're surrounded by the connection, if you have the things that you need to thrive, trauma will actually cause growth. It's when you don't have the resiliency and you're lacking the connection and you don't have the support and you don't have the skills that trauma actually creates like post-traumatic stress disorder and it becomes a lasting thing. So trauma can create either thing depending on what your skills are and where you're at and what you're surrounded by and even just your mindset. You can go like you can experience trauma and see it as a growth opportunity. And I'm not like we all come into different things, with a different background, different baggage, different life experiences. So this isn't bashing anybody that truly has PTSD because we know that that's a very real and very serious thing. But it is possible to go into a traumatic experience and come out of it with more skills and more understanding and more strengths. And that's the idea of post-traumatic growth, that it is very much a possibility.
There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and that's where trauma is stored in the body, and then it can manifest itself into physical ailments, fibromyalgia, bone degenerative disc, anxiety, depression. But the brain is an amazing thing, and the links that have been damaged are constantly trying to repair themselves. So as you say, you can actually go through a traumatic experience, and then when you're able to retrain your brain, you can come out so much stronger because of that. Because the original synapses have been damaged, but what grows back in place of that, but through retraining your brain, is a much better version of the original.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting when you like shut down certain thinking highways, you have to create bypasses and new highways. And the longer you use it, the higher the traffic you put on it, the stronger that gets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically the science behind it. What you're talking about, Steve, is that's the changing of a habit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And doing it over and over and over again. One of the reasons why sobriety is so hard is because drinking was the habit. It was the thing. So I have to figure out ways to maintain that. And when I figure out ways to maintain that, that is just maintaining my sobriety. Like when it came down to it, one of the things that people told me was make sobriety the most important thing I need to keep. And if I make my sobriety, especially early on, the number one thing for me to maintain and keep, it was going to give me everything else. Everything else I didn't know that I was going to have. But I'm going to wrap this one up here with this. So without my sobriety, I don't have my recovery. Because I need my sobriety for everything else to fall into place, for me to start learning, for me to start figuring out what my new solutions are. And that's the how. We talked about mindset and identity. And I think, Julie, you mentioned decision fatigue.
Mhm.
And Will, you talked about one day at a time. There's two different ways to do that. And the one day at a time pissed me off at the beginning.
It's not one day at a time. I like it. It's okay. I don't have to drink tonight. I frame it like that because the day is too much.
Delay the decision, right?
I have to
Postpone the decision.
1 hour at a time.
Yep. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of different ways to look at it. Find one that works for you. Find one that you can relate to, that you can hold on to, because it pissed me off because I didn't understand it. And once I figured out how to understand it in a way that had meaning to me, I was able to hold on to it more. And it sounds like that's what you did. And then Julie, the same thing, decision fatigue.
Mhm.
It's just not something I'm going to do for 30 days. So you just remove the decision fatigue completely because you've put it off for another 15 or 20 days.
Right.
What I want to do is say congratulations to the people that are listening to this now that have made it this far through Dry January. I hope you feel better than you did before. I hope you congratulate yourself for making it this far and trying either again or for the first time. There's a level of self-awareness here. Take a look at yourself. Do I feel better today than I did at the beginning of the year? Physically, mentally? Is there anything I could do different? You guys all shared some really valuable things. And I want to say thank you, Steve. Thank you, Will. And thank you, Mike, for coming on here and sharing your experiences and what sobriety and recovery means to you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I had a great time just having to sit down and talk about these serious topics, and but also in like a in a way that doesn't sound scary. That's what's nice about this podcast. Nothing sounds scary, but it's very practical advice. So take what we say with with heart.
Yeah. And if you find yourself struggling, what we've all done, and I've heard all of us, we've all asked for help. Asking for help and accepting help are two of the hardest things to do because it means we need to humble ourselves a little bit. So thank you guys. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Skype.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for being here. If you found this week's podcast helpful, consider sharing it with a friend and inviting them to have a conversation about it. Meaningful conversation is one of the best ways to create momentum in your recovery. Thanks for sharing your time with us, and we'll see you next week.